here we are, the very first episode, titled Where Is Everybody? Now this one is immediately notable for its intro. Multiple incarnations of this intro would occur throughout the seasons, but the one we have here is standard fare for Season 1. It wasn't anything special for just the first episode or anything like that. But what we should take note of is the opening monologue. These are usually a lot more nuanced. The place is here, the time is now, and the journey into the shadows that we're about to watch could be our journey. It's an unusually sparse opening monologue. I feel like it's kind of interchangeable with the opening monologue of any other episode, basically. Normally, these opening monologues might tell us the main character's name and briefly explain their situation to us. Sometimes they would even cut to a commercial break right after the opening monologue. They might have been stingy with information in this one because it might reveal too much information about the plot. I'm guessing they didn't want to spoil what was going to happen by the end. I'm going to be doing just that, by the way. The episodes of this show are short enough that I don't feel like I'm really depriving you of any significant experience if I spoil something that's less than 30 minutes long. Now, as it so happens, Netflix itself spoils a bit of this episode in its summary. They refer to the main character as a test pilot, which we don't really know until the episode is almost over. So let's summarize it. This man, whose identity and occupation we don't yet know, is walking down the road and he sees a diner. But when 15 seconds go by and nobody takes his order, he does what any reasonable person would do in this situation, and leaps the counter shouting at the unseen employees. When he doesn't find anybody in the back either, he continues his reasonable course of action, and starts helping himself to whatever he feels like. Now, sorry to spoil things, but to me, this is the most shocking thing that happens in the episode. I can't fathom leaping the counter at a diner and just helping myself to whatever is around, even if I intend to pay for it later. I know some people will open up food and start snacking when they're in the grocery store, even if they're planning to pay for it right before they leave, but even that is too much for me. Even that just seems illegal. That's a line I wouldn't want to cross. It's like the morality test of the shopping cart. You know, returning an empty shopping cart to a pickup area offers no benefit to the person doing it. They won't be punished in any way if they choose not to put away their shopping cart. But anybody with a basic moral compass will do it because it makes life a little easier for everybody around them. So I'm curious, who here opens packages at the grocery store before buying them? Post a comment on this video if you open packages at the grocery store before you buy them. For that matter, do you put away your empty shopping cart? If your answer is no, please include your home address so the rest of us can send you boxes of live hornets. Anyway, back to our main character. He makes his way to a nearby town, and all this time he can't find a single other person. He thinks he spots a woman in a car and starts talking to her, and here I have to make a note. Netflix already spoiled for us that this man is a test pilot, and pilots are traditionally required to have very strong eyesight. Our main character here clearly does not have that because he got this close without realizing that this was a mannequin he was talking to. But whatever, extenuating circumstances pertaining to the twist ending can justify this. And even after he does discover that she's a mannequin, he continues monologuing to her so that we, the audience, can know that he has amnesia and doesn't know what's going on. He hears a phone booth ringing, and he rushes over to it, but all he gets is a pre-recorded operator message. And here I have to make another note. Now, I'm no Zoomer. I remember the days before cell phones. I've used landline phones. I've used dial tone phones. I've used a rotary phone. My parents even had one of those antique phones that are mounted on the wall and you have to pick up the earpiece and then talk into the actual wall fixture. It wasn't an actually functional phone, it was more just a decoration. But one thing I've never understood is why in TV shows and movies, whenever the character is having a problem with their phone connection, they start mashing on the hook, receiver, button, plunger thing. They just start mashing on that over and over again, And I don't know what they're trying to accomplish doing that. All that's going to do is hang up their call, right? But I'm also no boomer. So if somebody can correct me on this, then please do. You know, if you know more about phones than I do, and you know why mashing on the button to hang up will somehow help a connection, then let me know how that works. I'm willing to admit I could be wrong. So everywhere our main character goes, he's finding signs that people were recently present. He finds a cigar on a desk that's still smoking, and he finds a sink running with some shaving supplies that look recently used. It gets to be so overwhelming that he runs outside and shouts the title of the episode.
Hey! Where is everybody?
He walks into a nearby soda shop and starts stealing stuff again, and something caught my eye here. I'll blow it up for you so it's easier to see. I noticed that one of the flavor selections on the wall is coffee. I've never been to a soda shop, and I get the feeling not many of them exist anymore, so I'm not sure if this list refers to flavors of ice cream or flavors of soda, but either one sounds good to me. Ice cream added to a cup of coffee, or coffee-flavored ice cream added to a soda? I'm going to assume that those are flavors of ice cream because vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry are at the top of the list. But I can't say I've ever had lemon. And another odd fact struck me here. While monologuing in the soda shop, he uses the term bloody a couple of times, like figuratively, as in this whole bloody town. Now, in present times, I only ever hear Americans use the word bloody in the literal sense. So if this were an actor from any other country, I wouldn't think anything of it, but it makes me wonder if using the term bloody like that was kind of in vogue in the 1950s and 60s. I might have wondered if this episode was written by somebody from outside of America, but no, this one is written by Rod Serling, and he was about as American as they come. So night falls, and things finally start to fall apart. I have experienced some boredom in my life, but I don't think I've ever been this bored. He goes to a movie theater, which is playing a movie called Battle Hymn. I had never heard of this movie, even though I watch quite a lot of them, but it was a real movie released a couple years prior to this episode. I'm guessing by its IMDb ratings, not a lot of people these days have seen it. So if you're one of those less than 1,000 people, let me know how it was. Anyway, the side of this movie reminds our hero that he's a test pilot. Somehow the movie projector gets turned on, but he can't find anybody in the building at all, so he runs outside screaming, and this is about where it comes to an end. Finally, we see the twist ending that explains it all. He was indeed a test pilot, and he was taking part in a psychological experiment where he had to spend an extended time confined to a small space, simulating what it would be like to take a solo mission to the moon and back. So after about 484 hours, and that's about 20 days, he finally started to break down and hallucinate. So looking back after this reveal, we get some interesting new perspective on the earlier events of the episode. I pointed out how he must have had really poor eyesight to think that this mannequin was a woman even when he stood really close to it. But when we find out that this all took place in a hallucination, a kind of fantasy dream, you can kind of write that off. The episode also has this one little artistic touch that I really liked. There are a couple of times throughout the episode that he almost gets trapped someplace really claustrophobic. There's a moment where he almost gets stuck in the phone booth when he's trying to leave it, and I thought, at first this was just like a brief moment of suspense to make the situation more tense. But then almost immediately after that, he's exploring the jail, and when he's looking inside the cell door almost closes on him, and he has to rush out to stop it from locking him in. And this is where the illusion kind of starts to break down. By the end of the episode, you realize that these are moments of the real world starting to shine through. He's realizing that he actually is locked in an enclosed space, but he's trying not to accept that realization and kind of stay in his fantasy world. Now let's talk about this episode's legacy. Apart from being the episode that kicked off a very remarkable series, this installment for me isn't really one of the more memorable ones. I can't really think of any way that this story impacted future sci-fi very directly, but I can let you know some interesting things about its place in the real world. The first moon landing took place about 10 years after this episode aired, so this was all pure speculation on how that might go. As it turned out, the first trip to the moon didn't take 20 days, but only took about 8 days, so our main character in this episode could have made it just fine. But manned moon missions in the 60s also pretty much always consisted of 3 crew members, so that problem of isolation would not really have come up. I have to say though, people in 1959 would probably have considered that a lunar astronaut would have been able to communicate with people on Earth by radio when he's on the mission. And 3 weeks in a small room like that doesn't sound that bad to me. I mean, it's probably pretty doable. But I don't want to attempt it, and I don't want to pick this episode apart too much. So let's move on to my conclusions. I've been wondering how I should sign these videos off, you know? I think most people would give each episode a rating, like maybe a number out of 100, or a letter grade, or a number of stars. But I think what I will do is keep a running list of every episode ranked from my favorite to my least favorite. These ratings will be subject to change, and my decision to use this type of rating system will be subject to change, but for episode 1, it's easy. So far, in my viewing experience, Where Is Everybody is the best episode of The Twilight Zone, and the worst episode of The Twilight Zone. I recommend it. I ended up talking about this episode longer than I thought I would, so for my next video I might try and keep it a little shorter, see how that goes. I might try and experiment where I do 2 episodes in the same video, so we'll see how that goes. Episode 2 is called One for the Angels, so stay tuned for my review of that episode, and possibly immediately after that, my review of episode 3, which would be Mr. Denton on Doomsday. Thank you for watching. This video was made possible with the financial support of my sponsors and donators listed here.